Previously on Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong.
That's why I love to draw, and I wanna create Supa-Saturday, 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 DrawAlong.
What's up, everyone? What's up? Welcome once again to Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong with me, Jerry Hinds. I hope you're feeling good on this, well, it's Saturday evening for you guys. It's early Sunday morning for me, and excuse me if my voice sounds a little bit dodgy. And that's because I was out late last night doing some reggae DJing, believe it or not. Let me see if I can get some background music happening here. Why is it not playing? No idea. Let's have a look. There it is. It's in a dodgy mood like me this morning. And yeah, I was out last night on the microphone doing the DJing thing. And yeah, you can hear the results of that. But anyway, if you can put it with my croaky voice, I'll be here for the next hour and a half. We'll be continuing our art tutorial. We've been doing some inking recently. But before we get to that, if you're quite a regular here at the Madness Entertainment Group, or even if you're not, earlier this morning, very early this morning, I was with my partner in crime, Raul Missinu. We had Late Night Art Attack. That was at 1 a.m. Saturday morning. So what's that? About 15 hours ago, right? Yeah, I was here for that. So I'm just going to give you a brief recap of what we got up to this morning on Late Night Art Attack. Take a quick look at this.
Previously on Late Night Art Attack.
So you can see there, I was drawing Goliath, and Raul was drawing Father Christmas. You know, I think I can't remember what you called it, but it was Father Christmas from a movie, where Father Christmas is a bit dodgy, I think. So that was great fun. That's every Saturday morning at 1 a.m. Now it's 6 p.m. in the evening there. It's actually 7 a.m. in the morning for me here. I'm based in Singapore. So let's get on to business. As I said, please excuse my voice. It's a bit croaky. I'm waiting for some fun this morning with some inking. We're going to continue inking by Master. So, what have we been discussing recently? I've been telling you about when I was younger, I used to do a lot of inking. And the style that I would use is what we could refer to as spiking, spikes. So here's the pencils underneath. We make that a bit darker. I know. You find people can see what I'm talking about? Right. So this is what I would call spiking. Okay, the blacks come out from the spotting. Then in later life, I discovered what I call kind of like the image style of hatching, which is gradation, where the spikes or the hatching comes out from the blacks more in a horizontal or parallel fashion, you could say. And if you mix the two, you end up with cross hatching. So what we're doing at the moment is, with the inking, we've done the spikes. Hopefully you were here with me last week when we did this. So this week, we're going to do the gradation inking, but I'm going to switch off my inking spikes. Now we're just going to ink the gradation on this layer. Now I'm working digitally, but if I were doing this traditionally, I would say, or I would have the same actions as I do here when I'm inking. I tend to ink with a brush when it's traditional, but there are some good pens out there. So let's get into this gradation inking, shall we? Nice one, sorted. I'm going to zoom in a bit. I must remember to zoom in, because the more you zoom in, the more fun it is for you to find people at home. Now here's the mapping pen. I'm using Clip Studio Paint software. And during the course of this, you may hear me shout something, or I have it on autopilot here. When working digitally, what do? You must remember to
Save! Save!
Save. Right. The other one I normally say is, my normal catchphrase here is,
Keep those pencils light.
that's when we're sketching. That's when we're sketching. But we're inking this morning. We're inking. What we're talking about this morning, it's not morning for you guys. If you're across the pond. Well, here we are. I've got my stabilization at 90. Stabilization makes inking digitally feel more organic, more traditional, if you like. So I'm going to start with the head. So I'm going to bring some gradual hatching from the blacks, and you may see me adjust a few bits of my original gradation as I go through and lay these final inks. I'm quite a disciplined inker, you could say. I like a very steady line, thick to thin. Thick to thin, or thin to thick. Yes, it's expression happening. Let's get his expression happening. Now I must remember to always warn the audience. I hope you can understand what I'm saying, because I have quite a thick Caribbean accent. My parents were from Barbados, but I was born in the UK. But for some reason, I used to speak a lot with my parents. And not that you can't understand what a Barbadian says, but we do have a tendency, people from Barbados do have a tendency to speak a bit quickly, to speak a bit fast. And when I get excited, I start going on. It's all good for me, but you find people not know what I'm going on about. Added to that is my British accent, which can be a bit dodgy for others to understand. I'm going to assume that you can understand me, and you're going to have some fun here doing some inking with me. Man, this tune that I'm playing in the background reminds me of last night. I was with DJ Rumshot at Blue Jazz here in Singapore. And I tell you what, I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm staying up till 1 a.m. with a microphone in my hand. Not recommended. Not at all, mate. Right, now here, I'm actually going to change a major part of how I did this inking here. I'm going to bring some hatching from the backs. Yeah, I'm going to add this. Some gradation. Let me check with you guys to see this thing is playing. Yeah, it's nice and close. Let me get closer. We get closer. Nice. Now, have I got my time lapse on? because I do like to record what I'm doing. Let me just check. My time lapse is still recording. How about that? Lovely. Let's put this gradation behind the shoulder here. I was telling you that last night I was doing the old reggae DJing, and there's one gentleman who was having a great time. He studied in UK, so he was quite adept to the kind of music that was being played. And then that guy bought me some serious whiskey. And I'm not the world's biggest drinker, but I think I'm feeling the aftermath. Man. Good. You notice that when I'm inking, I'm trying to get the line done in a smooth single stroke. I've told the story before of when I first saw the inks, the life inks of Brian Bolland. And I could, every stroke was a work of art. It was at that time, it was at that point, I knew I could not ink. The consistency of line that man had was ridiculous. But if you tuned in before, remember what I told you? What I didn't know was a lot of those great inkers were using quite expensive gear. Back in those, you're talking about 40 years ago, these brushes cost £40. Back in those days, that would be like, I think the dollar was 2 to 1 back then. So those brushes cost like $80 back then. Well, I was using brushes that cost £2. Now, I don't mind if I don't mind if I say so myself. But I was doing a pretty half-decent job. But compared to when I got the expensive gear, there was no comparison. No comparison whatsoever. I have a few people watching it upside. Thank you for tuning in to Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong. My name is Jerry Hinds. I'm here for an hour and a half. I'm here till 7:30 p.m. What I would like to achieve by the end of the day is all of this hatching, and if possible, the base colors. Then we're going to get into some digital coloring and spine master. How lovely. Make sure there's no messages. I tell you what, doing this streaming and keeping an eye out for messages. Well, Supa-Saturdays is quite a luxury because with the late night art attack, which I showed you a preview earlier, there's sometimes a bunch of us. Like we were joined by a couple of regulars last night, from Christian Zaffo and Edwin Madero, Artex. And we had another guest came on. Oh, goodness, the name escapes me right now. I no memory, man. It's getting worse. We were thinking from controlling the screen for multiple artists while drawing yourself and keeping an eye on the messages. Let's call it some serious multitasking. Actually, it's not that serious. I'm just a bit of a doofus, that's what it is. You may notice that I'm actually putting a few more hatching lines as I do this. I did render this quite quickly, and in some places there is room for more line. Yeah, my goodness, it's getting hot in here. Let me switch the earth con back on. Here in Singapore, it is summer. The summer temperatures throughout the year. Now we're currently in the monsoon season, so there's a lot of raining, but it's still always quite hot. But I'm not complaining. I grew up in the UK, as I mentioned, and I never get quite like cold weather. It's actually my kryptonite. Man, I used to play rugby in the freezing cold. And I tell you what, there was one day where we had a game in the freezing cold. And I was so cold, I couldn't do my pants up after the game. I went home with my pants unbuttoned. My fingers were absolutely frozen. And if you watch, okay, I don't know about rugby, but if you watch modern soccer, or modern football in Europe, you'll see the men are wearing gloves in the winter. A lot of them, not all of them, but you can wear gloves if you want. Back in my day, we weren't allowed to wear gloves. We got absolutely frozen. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, Unbreakable. It's a clever kind of superhero movie, starring, I think it's Bruce Willis, is it? Yeah. And he's got superpowers, but his kryptonite is water. I would say my kryptonite is the winter. I am not good in cold weather. And Singaporeans, they do like aircon. So you go to a lot of malls out here, and the aircon is full blast. And man, sometimes if it's too cold, I come out of there feeling like I've got the flu. Terrible. Radiation coming out of there. Nice one. Here coming up. I hope that aircon's not too loud. Sometimes things like that can really pick up on a sensitive mic. Yeah, talking about mics, I'm a right prat. Last week, I think you all could hear my voice, no problem. But at the end of the show, I realized that my mic wasn't in the right position. It was actually, here it is. You can see it's just here. You see that? Yeah. And it was kind of like what you would call maybe 2 feet away from me. And I know the mic, it would still pick my voice up, but it won't be as clear. And as mentioned before, with my accent, I can't afford any mistakes like that, mate. People were wondering what the hell's going on, man. The chest area. I do like the way I'm talking about gradation here in the hatching, and that did catch my attention. The way how a lot of the guys from Image Comics used to shade the chest area of the comics that they produced. It was very different. I'd never seen anything like that before, apart from perhaps the great artist John Byrne. When he came on the scene in the late 70s, he was doing something that I think looked pretty much like gradation coaching. And I stopped collecting comics, were Marvel comics from about 1980 to the early 1990s. And by the time I'd come back, that's when Image were on the scene. And my cousin back in UK, Victor, we call him Gilly, as in Gilligan's Island, because he looks a bit like Gilligan. Um, most of you, if any of you people out there are young, you won't even know what Gilligan's Island is. Maybe not. But anyway, my cousin Billy, he says to me, "Hey Jerry," they call me Jerry in the UK, yeah? "Jerry, you gotta check out these guys at English Comics." And I was just fresh back into comics. I was reading X-Men by Jim Lee, and there's no internet in those days. But I didn't know he broke ranks and went to form this company called Image. So I decided to check out some of their stuff. And I have to say, I was still more of a Marvel guy, but I respected their approach to production. It was refreshing. It was different. Good, we come on this other hand. Let's let the gradation come into this finger. I'm going to move that gradation to this. There you go. Add a bit here. I'm checking which layer I'm on. So there's nothing worse than inking. And you're inking on the wrong layer. But I can prove to you that I'm a good boy. Can you see all these locking? Can you see these little locks on my layers? I'm actually practicing what I'm preaching. You know, when you get a bit of experience, you start getting a bit cocky. You start getting a bit overconfident and not locking layers. And then accidents will happen. Or stupidity, more like. Now, if you hear someone sneezing in the background, that's my son. They had a massive party here last night. Him and a couple of his friends, and one of my daughters, are next door in the living room, fast asleep. They didn't make it upstairs to their bedroom. With a couple of friends out there with them as well. I think they're just waking up. I hope they don't come barging in here. Anyway, I digress. Some big strokes here. Make sure you use the ball of the hand. That's just beyond the wrist. You get that in contact on your little finger. Make sure that's placed firmly on the surface. And you rotate, you pivot. What I'm doing here, I've not seen other people exactly hatch in the way that I'm doing it either. But you can say I've been broadly inspired by what I've mentioned previously. Let's take an outward glance at how we're doing. Yeah, that's looking pretty decent. We're in good time. We're progressing nicely. Will it be safe? See the stalling there? It's saving. Good job. Let's zoom in on this knee area. Now, as mentioned, you got to save, but I'm using Clip Studio Paint. And what Clip Studio Paint actually does is it saves intermittently. So if something disastrous happens to your work, you can go into a system file and you will find a previous version of your work that the software saved outside of your control. It's just a backup and it's there. And that has saved me in the past. But that was quite a long time ago. I would say now that the software, everything is more stable. I've noticed, generally speaking, softwares crash less now than they used to 3-5 years ago. I use Photoshop on my other machine, and that rarely crashes these days. I'm old enough God damn, showing my age, man. I'm old enough to remember when software would crash very, very, very regularly. Do you believe there was a time I used to use a Mac called a Mac Plus? It didn't have a hard drive. It worked all with floppy disks. Jeez, man. When I think back to that, how the computer has come a long way. We're getting strokes, build them up gradually. And here's why I call it degradation. You see, the hatching is coming out gradually from the blacks. And I think the first person that I saw do anything like that may have been John Byrne. But Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, these guys really used it quite heavily. A genuine innovation in superhero comic art. Now I'm a superhero guy, so almost everything I do on Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong will be somehow related to Western superhero comics. Must be a bit of sci-fi. When I was growing up, the same guy that I mentioned earlier, Brian Bolland, used to ink Judge Dredd, a story called Judge Dredd, in 2000 AD. Man, when that came on the scene, all of us, 2000 AD was British. So all of us guys in the UK, we're collecting a lot of English comics, but Marvel and DC, they were the only way of powered up comics back in the day, back in the 70s. When 2000 AD comes out, man, it was really different. I very much liked it. And Brian Bolland was inking Judge Dredd in that comic. Absolutely superb. So I do like some science fiction. Down to the feet. It's thick, thin, thick. And I'm going to break the line. Come up into the light. Over to his left leg. Ooh, I'm going to finish your shorts. Slow down, boy. Slow down. Slow down. Now, I've taken creative license and I've given certain textures to Sky Master's belt. And this character was inspired by a late great artist from the realm of comics, Don Heck. And, back in the 60s and 70s, detail was less. You'll find that with comics, through the ages, they've become more and more photorealistic. The time has gone on. And I find that I appreciate it up to a point. When it becomes too photorealistic, then for me personally, what happens is you lose the character of a comic artist, right? If you're drawing from imagination, there are some things that will not be 100% anatomically correct. You'll find that certain artists may draw fists in a certain shape. Now, it looks like a fist. It's pretty even. Maybe it looks like their fist. But it's not photorealistic. It is stylized. And I tend to like stylized comic art. Well, a lot of the art nowadays in superhero comics, it is very, very accurate. And, you know, I always say you got to give the market what it wants. And if a continuation of comic art is to look as photorealistic as possible, it is what it is. But personally speaking, I like the warts and all of a comic artist and their style of drawing. And one thing I am doing here, which is relatively new, I suppose, is, sorry, not relatively new, but if you look at old comics, a lot of comic artists didn't really work with light sources. Everything was just flatly rendered. You could not tell, for example, that there was a definitive light source coming from above. A lot of comic artists worked like that for many years. Then came the advent of those who didn't do that. They worked a lot more with light source, and dare I say, more realistic. And they became very popular. And some of the other artists who never used to work with light sources, they started working with light sources. Like my personal god of comic art, and that's to call him. There's many gods out there, but this one is the ultimate to me, I think. It's a gentleman by the name of Gil Kane. I saw him writing a book once before, and I look at his work, and he's not kidding. He used to work with light sources early in his career. I'm going to change the hatching here to vertical. Look at the devil. There's one of those children that I mentioned was partying last night. My goodness, he's doing a bit of tidying up. Goodness will never cease. I've never seen that boy empty a bin before in his life. And then he was 18 the other day. And he had his first legal pint of beer with his old man, with me, at the gig. Well, it was a comedy gig. I do a bit of stand-up comedy promotion out here. And I do the DJing and the organizing. And he came to the gig and we had our first legal pint. Not to say that I'd ever given him an illegal pint before. I won't go as far as to say that. Then again, I'm not the most honest gentleman out there. We're almost done with this hatching. Oh, we got a few people watching. Thanks for tuning in, people. Remember, if you've got any questions, please do leave a comment. That helps with the algorithm as well. The more comments, the better it is for Magnus Entertainment Group. Now, I think we're there with the gradation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on the spikes so we get some cross-hatching happening. So let me switch off the pencils. I'm going to switch on the spikes. Let's zoom in and see what we've got. Right. So now this is broadly what we determine as cross-hatch rendering. And I do like it very much. The only problem with cross-hatching is that it does take some time. And you'll notice now, like, okay, see that? I put in some gradation here, and I mimic my spiking. That's because I broke my own rules. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to erase that totally unnecessary, young man. Will you please pay attention? Good. I'm going to go through, have a quick look to see if I contradicted myself anywhere. If I did there. Oh, this looks pretty decent. I'm going to add in a bit of gradation here on his shoulder muscle. There. Yeah. Did I miss that leg? Yeah, that's okay. Sorted my son. Going to his right foot. How lovely. Okay, people, we're going to do some base coloring. How about that? How about that? That's me impersonating my cheeky daughter. She would say something contradictory when she was very young, and then ask me after, how about that? Now I just spotted something. I forgot to put black in that space. Yeah. Good. Hey. Now let me get my reference. For Spymaster, we're going to put in the base colors. Nice. I've got a reference here somewhere for his costume. Let me go to my archives. Is that it? No, that's not it. There. There we are. So look, here's Spymaster. Here's a man. Here's a myth. So he's blue, green, and yellow. Oh man, that's by Don Heck, what you're looking at there. You can see the beginning of his name here, where it says Don. That image brings back such memories when I look at it. Unbelievable, man. That puts me in another world, you could say. So let me move that to another screen. I can refer to over there. The first thing I'm going to put in are the blues. Now, we don't call this Supa-Saturday DrawAlong for no reason. In fact, we shouldn't be calling it that at all, because look at this piece of information that I've missed out here. I think we should be putting a bit of relation in there. Nice one. Sorry. So yes, this is called Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong, because I hope you're following me in some of these exercises. If you missed out on anything, drop me a line and I can send you some digital files you can practice on. So part of this exercise of doing Spymaster is now the coloring. And this is why I color in the way that I do. We just did our gradation. We switched that off. We did the spikes last week. We switched that off. We got the spotting. We switched that off. We got inner contours. We switched that off. What you're looking at now are all the areas of the character that is in different colors. So now we can get the paint bucket and we can drop the colors in very easily. So we go underneath the inky. Here's all the penciling down here, yeah? I'm going to call this blue. And no prizes for guessing what color is going to go on this layer. So here I am going to my color wheel. I come into just as it comes into sky blue. Now we're going to be shading this with a technique using the tools of dodge and burn. When you use dodge and burn, you don't want your colors too saturated. So I'm going to choose this blue. That's very saturated up there. See the color wheel I'm dealing with? Look at the bottom left of your screen. That's the color wheel. You can see the top right of the swatch is the most saturated area. I'm coming down slightly into the more pastelized area, less saturated. You can change these colors anytime, of course, but I'm going to start from there. I'm going to get my paint bucket. I'm going to say refer to all the other layers. And this is blue. That is blue. This body is blue. Outside his eye is blue. But there's another part coming into this later on. Top of his head is blue. Is there anything else? No, I think everything else is yellow and green. It's a bit of red and a bit of a metal color. I think my son's forgotten how to close the door. So we've done the blues. Next, let's go for the yellows. And what's really cool about Clip Studio Paint, if you can look at my layers over here, you can see they're different colors. You can make layers different colors in Photoshop, but from what I understand, you have to use the colors that they give you. In Clip Studio Paint, you can actually make any color you like. So the yellow, again, you can see I'm in the color wheel and it's not overly saturated. So this part is yellow, that part is yellow. The glove and shoulder gear plus the head is yellow. Pants outside, that's yellow. Anything else is yellow. Not from what I can tell. Next, we're gonna go for the basic green. He's got two different greens, it looks like. Should we make that all one green? Yeah, we'll keep it simple. Green. Let's move the color down here. Make this green a little bit darker. I'm going to push the color picker down here. Right, his lower feet, or lower leg and feet with green. These dials in the back of his arms and hands are green. The nodes across his chest are green. Now his whole belt, you know, I'm going to make it two different greens. It appears that this back part of the belt, these are all one green, the same as the other greens around here. But then these bits inside, the green looks a bit darker. So we're going to put green 2. How original is that? Now here's where I'm using the color picker for the layer color. And there, we've got a darker green layer. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pull this in this area. And outside of the S is a darker green. And the shapes and pockets here are the dark green. Good, that's his basic colors there. Now we're looking at his gun pouch. His gun pouch knife across the chest is a gray. You can see they're struggling to do that color. You normally find that grays are a little bit blue in old comics. And the Incredible Hulk started off life as gray. But Stan Lee, you know, the co-creator of Hulk, said that they could never get the gray constant. And he changed it to green, which makes perfect sense. At the end of the day, gray isn't even a color. It's a shade. Right, so I think that's about, you can use this for the pouch. I call it gray. I'm gonna come in here, give myself a gray layer. So that's the pouch, that's that color. And the knife across his chest is actually the same color as the pouch. Now the gun seems to be a bit lighter and a bit more purple in its hue. So I'm gonna get a new layer. I'm just gonna call this purple for the sake. That's the purple color automatically there. I'm gonna drop that purple in on that gun. The S. Now here's a classic piece of costume design. The S on his belt is red. Now, I often run workshops entitled How to Design Superheroes. And this is a very important lesson. When you got logos on characters, etc., you want to make sure there's something special about it. And see, that is the only piece of red on his costume. It's classic. Now the eyes are white. When coloring white in comics, for shading, I make it a light gray. Now I may not be shading these eyes later, but I always put in a basic light gray with this white, because that allows for shading later. Now it's time to go in and do a bit of touch up. You're going to have a close look to make sure the color was able to get into all the spaces where lines come together in a quite acute way. You can see, so on the blue layer, I'm just going through the blue first. Do one color at a time. Don't get tempted to switch from color to color. It can be very tempting, but at the end of the day, if you do one color at a time, you will be faster and you will probably miss less bits of cleanup required. Okay, there's our flats for our blue is in. Look at our flats for our yellow. There's a little bit missing there. See that? Look at that accident in the inking layer. Now what is that? Back to the yellow. In there. See? Where the lines come together, where any inking lines converge in an acute way, that is where you get problems with color getting into that area. Now, just taking a look, there seems to be a comment used there. Addie Marie. Hi, Addie. Looking good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What you got here? Shaped, now bank, and I can't read the end of that. Best viewers stream bulldog. Remove the space. I'm not sure what that means. Is that someone spamming? Thanks, Addie. Most appreciated. Here we are with our cleanup. We're checking our yellows. There. Yeah. Couldn't you get in there? That looks pretty decent. No, I can tell you that I've seen something that I've done here where I was a bit naughty. Remember the inner contours? Here's the other inking, right? I've done something that I shouldn't have done. His eyebrows are actually yellow. I know he's got eyebrows in his costume. Man, that is what you call some serious funky design. Right, let's continue this cleanup. Hang on. Look at this. Got some bad inking in there. And his eyebrows, his contours, right? These are, technically speaking, by my own rules, on the wrong layer. So I'm going to cut these from the contours. I'm going to paste. And I'm going to put them into the inking key lines. I'm going to put that layer. That's where it should be. But at this stage of coloring, yellow, this should be yellow. I had those lines on the wrong layer. And I'll go in, make sure the yellow's in here. Okay. Save. Now we're onto our greens. Let's check that our greens got into all the nooks and crannies. Let's come down here. Oops, I got my contours on. Got my contours. That looks all kosher. Oh, yeah. See behind that belt. Let me zoom in. Let me get up close. Point like a tiger. So you people can see what's going on, man. Every week I forget to zoom in maximum. I forget to go max and zoom in. Yep, that all looks good. These greens up there looking pretty decent. Blendito. Yep, nothing going awry here. Let me go to green too. Let's make sure nothing here got mixed. That all looks pretty good. Yep. Now we go to our grays. Let's check. Down there. Some dodgy inking there, mate, I tell you. God damn, Jerome. What kind of inking is these? Dodgy inking, look at that. Look at that. I'm a bit of a neat freak. That all looks good. I think I've done the cleanup. Don't see anything escaping here. Ooh, sorry, the knife. That's a bit dodgy. That's a bit naughty. I've got some serious noise on my inking layer. Look at this. What's all this? This. Some of you, you're probably at home thinking, my God, this guy's fussy. Indeed I am. Look at that. Dodgy inking. Very dodgy inking indeed. What's wrong with you, boy? Just neaten that up. Right. In the contours. Okay, it's been pretty decent. And when I come to shade now, I'm going to shade the colors here. I switch on all of the inking. We've got our spotting, we've got our spikes, and we've got our gradation. And let me zoom in so you guys can get a closer look at what's going on. So here's our man. We're now going to add some light and dark to all of his colors. So look over at my layer palette. You see all of my base colors are over here. So I normally start with the biggest colors first. So I'm going to go for the blue. So what we do is we duplicate this layer. You know, we have a blue copy. And the blue copy is where I do all of my shading. Now we've drawn this character with a basic light source coming from above. Let's bear that in mind. A main light source is coming from above. Okay? So here's how I use the dodge and burn technique. I get my spray can. Here, with the spray can, it is not normal. Normal would be this. If you've got a spray can, you hit the spray can doing something normal. Okay? I don't want to do any spraying. I want to only affect the color. So I must come for a function called color burn. This is going to make the blues darker in any way that I want. Now, here's a blue. If I do that, because it's in green, it's shading it with a bit of green. If I push the color picker over here into the solid blacks, it shades towards black. Very clever function. Now, with blue, I like to have a tinge of purple. So I'm going to bring my color dial into the purple region. And I'm going to put, so there's the dial in the purple. And I'm going to put the picker. This comes with a lot of feeling, actually. There's no real science to this. I'm going to put it near dead center in the top quadrant of the picker area. So I'm going to see how this affects the blue. So I'm going to leave the accent on the outer leg of it, I've got my brush density at 20, so it's not 100%. But I want this to be a gradual effect. So the light source is coming from above. So I would want that shadow in this area. Very light, not too much. Let me zoom in a bit. But if you make it too dark, you're going to color up your hatching. So stay subtle. This center muscle here. I'm going to put a slight shadow under that. I'm looking at my other monitor here. And wow, it's really making the shading look much darker than on my digital paint tablet. What you guys are seeing, actually, depending on your monitor, what you're seeing could be perhaps much darker than what I'm actually doing. But maybe I'm using a TV as a third monitor here, and it's not the most technologically, how do I say? It's not the most expensive TV, let's say. So I dare say the colors might be a bit off. Put a bit of shadow in the lower kneecap, lower leg. Bit of shadow down there, come out of the shadows here. And when I first started digitally coloring, I had a habit of overdoing it. But when you've got hatching, your coloring can be minimal. In fact, modern comics, I think I mentioned something, I alluded to this briefly earlier. A lot of modern comics don't even have any hatching. They leave all the coloring, all the shading to the coloring. And in fact, my Supercross series, which is currently just going to start a Kickstarter. You're going to see an ad. I'm going to run an ad for this later. My Supercross series that I did, all of the shading was done with the colors. There was very little hatching or spotting. The only characters that had spotting were the bad guys. All of the main heroes were only shaded with color. No spotting, no hatching. I did that for two reasons. One, I was experimenting to some degree, but I also did it to save time. I think that's the main reason why so many comics nowadays don't bother with hatching. But I'm sure if collectors really didn't like it without the hatching, they would have to put it back. But if the readers are okay without the hatching, then there's no point in stressing yourself out. Now, we've done the blue on the legs here, okay? A way you can keep track of your shading is if you switch off your spotting and your shading, you should see the foundations of what could be a painting. Can you see that? That shows that there is a light source going on. And I believe this is how a lot of colorists ended up doing what they're doing. And once you've got the basic key lines, you can shade. You can really go into this and start to shade. And I've done that. I've done a lot of digital paintings straight with dodge and burn like this. Put the shadow under the pouch. Let's switch on the hatching again. So let's go up to, let's do this inner arm. Like bit of shading here. Now the light source is coming from above. Never defy the light. Quite often, if you do a drawing and something doesn't seem right, sometimes you look at something and you think, something's not right, but you don't really know what it is. Quite often, if you've done any kind of shading, check that at some point you may have contradicted a light source. Even if you didn't mean to be using a light source, you might have done something that implies there's a light source, then part of the drawing does not imply there's a light source. So there's a contradiction of shading. And quite often, that is what is wrong with your drawing. A contradiction of light source. Very, very important. There's one Instagram artist that I follow called Bella Ratchman. Well in place, but it's her knowledge of light, second to none. Absolutely brilliant. But as I said, a lot of artists in the old days, even nowadays, there's many artists who don't really work with light sources. The colorist has to sort out quite a lot of it to some degree. So it's definitely a preference thing. Right it. Lower arm. Put a shadow in here. Yeah, baby. Good. Now I always do my shadows first. Okay. We will get to the highlights at the end. I do all of my shadows first. So here I am doing the shadows. On the blues, I will do the shadows on the yellows next. Now this is a bit metallic. I've got to zoom in here. Smaller brush. I'm going to be a bit more extreme on the dial. It's a different texture. This is not material. So it's going to call for a bit more detail, let's say. Fine detail. You put a shadow in there, and you put a shadow on the underside here, on the side there, this lower part here. Nice, bottom of the dial, very bottom. I'm going to put this in a crevice, I'm going to shade out there. I'm going to put the shadow, the bottom of all this, going onto the plate beneath. Good. Then I'm going to really exaggerate that shadow. Small brush. I'm going to really exaggerate the shadow underneath to push them forward. Make sure the darkest part is at the bottom. It's coming up into the light. I'm going to put a shadow actually in the outer. Re-establish the light source coming from above. This one falls in the center, right? This side, that's needed. I'm going to put just a small accent of shadow behind these gaps as well. There, and a bit coming up from the depths down here. Good. Just a bit of shadow under his eye. There and there. That pushes the eyes forward. Okay, this is how we're going. This is how we're going on, man. Right, here are the shadows. Whoops. Where's my sharing gone off? Why is that not on the screen? Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for some reason my screen sharing went off. I don't know how long it's been doing that. Good Lord. I have no idea why that dismounted from the screen. I must have hit a shortcut or something. Ah, damn. I don't know how much of that you guys saw. Anyway, there's still some of you. Some of you are still there watching. Thank goodness. My display was gone from the stream. And I was there talking away. And I have no idea if you guys could even see what I was talking about. What the? Well, that's a new one. I've never seen that before. Right, so we're going to shade the yellow. So we go to the yellow layer, we duplicate that, And I like to shade yellow with a tinge of orange. So there's the dial. We go to the orange area. And I'm going to bring the color picker kind of out of the browns. No, between the browns and the orange. I'm going to try that as a shading hue. Good. I'm going to keep my intensity to 20. I'm going to put a shading on the underside of this arm here. Now this is a bit more gentle. I'm going to up my intensity up to 30. So the glove, I'm going to give me a fold in here. Can you see that? Let me get a bit closer. You can see what I'm doing. And I see certain colors show up very well on my other monitor. I think you guys can see this orange going in. Remember, the light source is coming from above. Always try to keep that in mind. So this part of the disc is going to fall into darkness. I'm not going super detailed on this. So the coloring is not too extravagant. Back in the arm, back in the arm. Back in the arm, back in the arm. Now, bigger brush here. With the big shoulder muscle here, there's going to be a big shadow under here. I'm looking at my other screen. I'm looking at how the orange is looking. It's so different to my main screen. It's quite funny. Right, big brush. I want a big shadow on the lower part of the chest here. Same here. Carry it over. Reduce that brush, boy. You're going to do the shoulder. Okay. A thinner sinew here. So I'm going to make that brush a bit thinner. Put muscle in there. Light source coming from above, yeah? I'm going to put some on the underside of this shoulder here. You do the rest of the arm. And then go up. Do the head. Lower arm. Muscle here, back of the arm. Come up into the light. Come up into the light, boy. Back of the arm. My inner arm is going to be in darkness. Take the shot over here. Now, something that I can do, I'm going to put an accent under the decoration. Drop one in here. Yee! Look at my clean up there. A bit, see that? Yee! I missed a bit of yellow there. Somebody please fire that teacher. Will you please fire that teacher? Inner thumb. To put a shadow in there, and definitely not thumb underneath. That ain't getting no light, boy. Or very little light. So the light source is coming from above, so the shadow is going to fall on the right side of this fist. I like the way how we can see such detail in gloves. But the superheroes are amazing. The amount of contradictions and things that can't really happen. But who cares, man? The vibes. The vibes. Look at these seams in the back. When I see that, I've done some bad coloring there. See this? The light source is coming from above. There should not be a shadow here. So what I'm going to do is I get my fingertip tool and I'm going to push that shadow out. I don't like that. Now, if you're going to get bits of shading spilling over into areas that you don't want it, you're supposed to make sure you select just the area that you want to shade. But this is a relatively simple illustration. So I'm just going right across everything. Okay, so here we come to the face. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a bit of shadow. First thing, sorry, what is collarbone. There's going to be a deep shadow around his head. Where his head. There's another secondary black shadow we can drop in here later. But here's just the main one with the color. His neck is in darkness. His head is protruded forward. We put a collarbone shadow. Yeah. Bit of a shadow behind the dials like we did on the arms. Shoulder muscle shadow. Now, something I don't like sometimes is when things are not smooth. Now, my shading here is not nice, so I'm going to blur. I'm going to blend this so it's a bit smoother. Yeah, man, I'm a bit of a neat freak. Yeah, man. So we get a bit of a shadow on the lower chin. Light sources coming from above. Again, look at its mask, how tight it is. Now, if someone's mask is this tight, they would probably suffocate, right? But I don't like those sort of smart comments. Yeah, so what? He's Spy Master, man. He can do it. The shadows down the side of the nose and the side of the face. Drop the shadow in under here. Same jawbone, get a shadow in here. Bottom of the ears. I'm going to put an accent on his lower eyebrow costume deco. In here. Yeah, get his expression happening. Exaggerate the expression. Just a bit of a shadow on the lower brow, so we get the feeling of the cranium of the head. We'll put a shadow in here. Same in here. We'll put an accent under the dial. Not too pronounced, but there. Yeah. Get his expression going. Get the darkest part going into the shadow just above the eyebrows. Coming in. Use a bit of color to get the expression. In fact, I don't want to get too much. Sometimes when I start shading, I can start getting into some fine detail, man. God damn. And then let me get my blend tool and smooth this out a bit. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Just put a bit of shadow in the inner ear there. And there. Accentuate those jawbones. Okay. So that's our main shadows. For the top part, now to get his shorts. Now a global shadow. A global shadow is a big shadow because something's casted onto it. Like the head had a global shadow on his body just now. His gun pouch and the lean of his body, it's going to throw much of those shorts into a generic shadow. You get a big brush and you go over it with one film of light shading. You get a small brush just to do a bit of detail to some of the cloth. That's enough of that. Now we come on to the boots, the metal part. I made it metal. I'm not convinced it's okay. I'm not sure if it is metal in the old comic, but it looks a bit metal to me. So I put an accent at the bottom. I'm going to give it a thickness. Now here's one of those instances where I should really be masking off this, because I don't want any shadow on the bit behind it. Okay, lazy teacher. This one doesn't matter because there's no yellow below. I'm gonna put the shadow here. I'll put the shadow there. Thin brush. You want the shadow close to the line. Then I'm going to get big brush and put a general global shadow just slightly on the inner lower leg. There. Over to the other boot. Now this leg is behind. This is actually in the darkness, you could say. So I'm going to put one global shadow completely over the top of that. For starters, just put it in the darkness. That will send it behind him. Then simple shadow. I'm going to keep an eye on my screen now. Remember, it disappeared just now. That was unbelievable. I'm going to watch the replay of this and see how long it was gone. I don't think it could have been long because none of you guys left, from what I can tell. Okay, that's our yellow's done. How are we doing for time? We've got 12 minutes left. I think we get through all of our burning. Yeah, I think we'll do all of our burning this week. Should be able to do that. So let's go to the green, the first green. I'm going to duplicate that. So with the green, I don't want anything too extreme with shading the green. So I'm going to bring my color picker to green. Sorry, my color dial to the green area. And I'm going to put the picker towards the darkness area. I'm going to take my density back down to 20. And there. Yeah. That'll do for the green. Big shadow for this. You want a dial. Not a dial, sorry. A dome feel. So we just put in the base shadow over there. Let's go and do the other ones like this. Hang on, what the hell is going on here? Yee! I missed out some of my rendering on the other dials. Ah, damn. And before, I must remember to fix that before leaving today. We'll fix that since we finished doing this. Baby. Now the underside of this belt. Oh look, I forgot to do that spotting under there as well. Teacher's too busy talking. Too busy talking. Too busy talking. Let's put a shadow. Yeah, I should have put a bit more rendering in these dials as well. I drop that in after I finish here. Good. Then we put a global shadow on the chest piece. Then we go into some finer detail. More brush. I'm going to make the knife cast a shadow onto the quilt. The first thing I'm going to do That is some serious embroidery, boy. Right, I'm going to put shadow on the lower parts of the quilt. It's kind of dictated by the inking already. You just emboss the cloth like this. It is a bit tricky because you can't have the shadow on the area below. Again, this is where you could be masking these individual shapes, but I think we can do this quite safely without interfering with the shapes below. You see the computer store then? That was it doing. That was the computer or the software doing the automatic backup I told you about earlier. Every now and again, you might see the software store is doing its own intermittent backup. Good. You put the shadow just behind the dial there. Go to the belt, a bit more shadow down here. I'm going to drop some black in there, I missed that part. Big brush, shadow on the inner leg and lower boot. Global shadow. Put a generic shadow just as the foot comes in, the creases there. And I'm going to put an accent right on the lower sole to give it a put. There. Thin brush. Let me get closer. If I'm too far away, guys, drop me a message saying, Jerome, we can't see what you're doing. Will you please zoom in? Yeah. Yeah. Put a shadow. It's underside. Good. Remember, this foot is in the darkness. I'm going to get one big global shadow over the whole thing to start with. Inner leg, always the most dark. Add to the accents here. That's enough for that. Good. Now let's go for our second green. I'm going to shade it with the same shade of green. We've got the plate. Got a bit of shadow coming down the side of that. The pouches, that's in a shadow. Got most of the shadow on the underside. A gradient shadow on this. And just put this side a bit more in the dark. Under the pouch. Right. Good. Now we're going to look at the red. Sorry, no, the gray, the pouch. Duplicate that. I'm going to shade this with a dark blue. So I'm going to bring the color dial up to blue. Put the clicker there. First I want a shadow over here. Zoom in. Right hue of a blue, what I want. These bits of detail here. These can be pulled out. We started with a global shadow to put the inner the inside into a slight kind of darkness, or that is away from the light. Very light shadow there. When we come inside, this is inside of the flap in here. In here could be darker. I'm going to put a certain degree of darkness on the thickness of the flap, because this is away from the light. The button, I catch that as well. And a subtle shadow in the upper part here. And same here. I'm leaving a light accent down the thickness of the pouch there. I will accentuate that with a highlight later on. And that will do for the shadows on the pouch. Now the knife, I'm just going to give this a basic thickness. It's going to eventually come across as being more metallic. Just raise it slightly first. Inside here, give that a thickness. Make sure the shadows on the far side. And a light gradation again along there. That we do for the shadows on the knife. We will get to the highlights next week. Let's look at the gun. And the gun is almost in darkness. So I'm going to shade this. I think we can stick. We can stick with the shading for this. I'm going to go across the whole thing first to put it in darkness. Then a global shadow for the back part of it. That's really under the flap. Now a bit of light is going to creep in. Few more targeted shadows. Quite a lot of this actually depends on the highlights later. We're just doing our shadows first. Yeah, baby. Do the shadows first, baby. Good. Then we come to the red. And we've got a basic shadow going across the bottom. Now I want to shade this with a brown. So I'm going to come across to my gold area, going to the brown. Big brush. Yeah, bottom of the S in darkness. Wow, my TV screen is really dark compared to my antique. Yeah, we're throwing that brown, we're throwing that S into the darkness. Now with the eyes, not a lot to do with that yet. They're going to be the last thing. So how are we doing for time? Oh my God, got 2 minutes left. Okay, I'm just going to quickly fix some inking on the gradation. On the gradation, quickly. I want to run you people some fun at it. Let's show you what we're up to here at the Madness Entertainment Group. And what I'm doing elsewhere as well. Naughty teacher, missed out this detail. And up here, I missed it out. Terrible. Please don't tell anyone. Keep it a secret between us. Not too much detail. Yeah, good. And I forgot to spot in here. Spotting. Let me unlock that. Naughty man. In there. Should have been black. What do you think you're doing, boy? Okay. So there we are. There. We've got our shadows in on Spy Master. So let me just do a quick zoom in so you can see what we did. Right, there's the basic shadows in for the coloring. We got all the inking done. We're going to do the highlights next week. Okay, meanwhile, I'm going to leave you with a few messages. Thanks so much for tuning in once again. Oh, my chair. Remember I told you about my chair? I think I'll ask Santa for a new chair this Christmas. It keeps sinking. Yes, thanks so much for tuning into Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong. I hope you had some fun watching what I'm doing here with Spy Master. And we will add the highlights next week. And I think we'll finish this drawing next week. Do watch some of the trailers to see what else I'm getting up to. Also what we're doing here at Madness Entertainment Group. You've been a great audience. I'm going to assume that you're a great audience. I can't actually see you, of course. But thanks so much for tuning in. I'm just getting ready to run you some trailers now. Let me switch off this backing track. My name is Jerry Hinds. I'm here every Saturday at 6 p.m. for Supa-Saturday's DrawAlong. I encourage you to bring your pens and pencils, etc., or your stylus to follow me on various drawing exercises. Thanks so much. Here's a few messages, then we're going to play the end credits. Peace.
Ozzy, what are you doing? Come and have a look at this lovely book that was sent over.
You're wrapping in the burning.
Oh, go on and spit the bat out your mouth. No one can understand you like that.
Say how 5 dentists and all.
Oh, well, that's not much better. Ozzy, why don't you sing to me? I can always understand you when you sing to me.
Fucking my brains. What is this my publisher sent me? Inked in black with art so sweet.
So what do you think? Do you like it?
Oh, Lord, yeah.
If you like stories about truth, honor, and justice, then you should check out MAGA Man. It is Donald Trump as many now see him, the defender of justice and a warrior for peace through strength. MAGA Man is an all-American style 22-page comic book, so get over to fundmycomic.com and support the culture of truth, honor, and justice. With MAGA Man, the most needed hero of all. MAGA Man.
Thunderzone Comics returns. 5 all-new comics, Sumo Boy, Weirdo, Marshall Strong, Big House Blues, and Super Cross, plus a free how to draw characters from the Thunderzone. Bringing you back all 5 new releases. The Kickstarter pre-launch campaign is live now. Thunderzone Comics!
DrawAlong. live viewing of any Madness Entertainment Group production, you can find all our content on Roku or as a member of this channel. We'll see you next time on the Madness Entertainment